Hello and welcome to today's ESG Bites. We're just going to give it a couple more minutes just to let everyone have a chance to join today's webinar. So if you could bear with us for a minute or so just to give everyone a chance to join. Great, I can see more people joining. Okay, great. So I think we've kind of hit 2 o'clock UK time. So hello and welcome everyone to today's ESG Bites, leveraging research to drive your social impact strategy. My name is Mitten Majumdar and I'm a director here within SLR's ESG Strategic Advisory team. And ESG Bites is a series of short bite-sized webinars on key ESG topics. And I do believe it's the last one of the year, and what a great topic to end on. So today we're going to be looking at how research and insights can provide a powerful tool to drive your social impact strategy. And this is something that we're seeing more of our clients do, particularly with the greater focus on the S in ESG. I'm particularly thrilled to be joined by a guest speaker today. So we've got Sara Reed, who's Director of Sage Foundation Global Partnerships. And we recently undertook a project researching barriers faced by entrepreneurs from underserved communities. And Sarah's going to be introducing herself later, and we'll have a chance to hear from her in terms of some of the first-hand kind of outcomes and learnings from the project, and exploring how to use research and data as a foundation for your own social impact strategy. So with that, if we could turn to the next slide, please. So before we begin, just a little bit of housekeeping. To avoid background noise, we've muted all participants, but please do share your questions using the question box. So we'll be monitoring this as we go along, and we've also got time for Q&A at the end. So please, don't be shy, put your questions in. We've got Sarah here as well, and we're all on hand to kind of answer questions. And if we could go to the next slide, please. So just briefly before we dive into the webinar. So for those of you who don't know us, at SLR, we're a global consultancy offering clients the full spectrum of sustainability strategy through to project delivery services. We've been working in the field of social impact and responsible and sustainable business for over 25 years. And if we go to the next slide. So today's webinar really covers 4 key questions. So firstly, thinking about why do we undertake research in terms of social impact, how to scope it, thinking about where you can go and gather that information, research and data, and then really importantly, how do you use those results in the most effective way? And we'll be bringing Sara into the conversation to kind of hear firsthand her insights as well and the work that Sage has undertaken. So in terms of the next slide, so just briefly who we are as the speakers today. So I'm Mitten Majumdar, a director within ESG Strategic Advisory. I've been lucky enough to be working with clients from a broad range of sectors on social impact, helping them to think about developing their approaches, implementing them, and measuring social impact, and using data and insights as a way to underpin that as well. And I'm going to hand over to Sara next to introduce herself and her work at Sage Foundation.
Thanks, Mitten. Hi, everyone. Sara Reed. I work on the Sage Foundation team. We are a part of Sage, the Sage corporate structure. Our foundation has really undergone a lot of work, which I'll be talking about coming up as we re-strategize, and that's a lot of what this was about today. But I've been lucky enough to be on the team for 7 years now, the Sage Foundation team, and lead right now our global programs that we run. So really glad to be here today. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Sara. And hi, everyone. My name's Katie. I'm a managing consultant at SLR, and I work with companies to develop and measure community strategies and social impact programs, which make a real difference to some of the biggest challenges in our society. So let's jump in with the next slide and the what and the why. So what do we actually mean by an insights-driven approach? Here, what we mean is undertaking research into social issues that your business does or perhaps wants to make a difference in. And this research should generate data and insights into the nuances around those social issues and the specific challenges that your beneficiary groups face. Now, why is that research and data helpful? Well, the expression that springs to mind, and I think I'm actually misquoting here, is information is power. So research gives you robust information to make decisions about the direction of your program. It helps teams of all sizes, whether you're a one-man band or a team of 10 people, to take the personal opinions out of your decisions. Research provides you with that objectivity to say, this is the situation and this is what is really needed. Another thing that data allows you to do and research enables is to build credibility both internally but also with your external stakeholders. Now, we've been seeing so much more scrutiny on the S of ESG in recent years, be that from your investors, customers, or governments. And so having insights and data to help build a robust case for why you're doing what you're doing really helps. And it also helps with your senior leaders and gaining buy-in from them because they're used to using data and research to take those decisions. And by having that data, you're building your credibility when making those cases. Now, I think many of us can appreciate the fact that resources, be that your team size or your budgets, can often be limited. So having a clear case underpinned by data helps you to make those decisions about where you're going to focus those resources. And of course, finally, the most important thing is about maximizing your impact. Having a better understanding of your social issues, your beneficiary groups, and the challenges they face can help you to identify, first of all, where there are gaps in external delivery, or perhaps where there's saturation, so there's too much focus on one form of intervention or one type of challenge. And so it helps you to understand where you can intervene in order to have the most impact and collaborate best. Now, in terms of when to undertake this research, this is something I'd like to pick up with Sarah, but we found it can help across the lifespan of your program. So obviously when your program is in its infancy, understanding your external context is really important to designing your social impact program from the beginning, making sure that your specific beneficiary groups and their needs are at the forefront of your program or strategy design. However, you might also want to consider undertaking a midpoint kind of program review. And so undertaking research at this stage to know what is working well or what isn't working well can also be really crucial. Or it might be that external circumstances have changed. For example, we worked with a client who had a fantastic program on well-being, and specifically mental health and well-being. And of course, during COVID, mental health for young people took a massive hit. So they actually, after COVID, but after we were in the middle of COVID, they undertook a research project to understand what those specific impacts of the pandemic were on young people and how they could pivot their program in order to better help young people affected by COVID. And of course, at the end of your program, you might want to consider undertaking additional research to prove the impact that you've had, to share your learnings. So Sarah, maybe I can pass over to you now and ask to provide us with a brief description of the research on underserved entrepreneurs that we collaborated on, but also specifically what the drivers were. I know you already mentioned re-strategizing for the research.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. So many of the things that you said, I'm like, yep, check. So that's it. I mean, you said so many of them, but I think just to bring them to life with, our experience at Sage, we definitely, I think starting from where you ended, which was those different phases you can do research, we were at that beginning phase. And what we realized, I mentioned this before, but we do sit within the corporate structure of Sage. And so it was incredibly important for us to always be looking at and watching the business. And businesses, Sage makes decisions based on data. And so as a foundation team, it really serves us well and serves the company well if we also make decisions backed by data. And so that's really the primary driver, was that we knew that, and one interesting thing that we've talked about as a team before is that the research results weren't surprising, which I can go into, I think, maybe later on. We didn't know. We knew we might be surprised by them, we might not, but it didn't matter to us. It mattered that we actually had the data and we weren't just working on our own assumptions. We did do the research at that outset. We were at the beginning of, I would say, really two different purposes. We were re-strategizing, and so this was really important in helping us to really hone in on what are the areas where SAGE has the most resources that we can leverage to help those groups that, again, are in line with the business. And so SAGE as a company, we support small and medium businesses, we support entrepreneurs. As a foundation, we wanted to go a step further than the business can go. Where are those entrepreneurs who the business can't access as traditional customers? What are the barriers they're facing that aren't allowing them to find success in entrepreneurship and that? But I think I feel like I might be going past. But anyway, the biggest driver was, where let's be data backed, and let's make sure that everything that we're doing being data backed allowed us to know that we were the audience who we would be serving, as well as what we would, the SAGE resources we would be leveraging would be brought together to make that most impact. So I think that was our main driver.
That's great. That's really insightful. And I think it's really interesting what you say about kind of the culture of SAGE and making sure that how they work is followed through and how you work. So that's really interesting. Thank you. Great. So in terms of, we kind of already touched on some of these points, scoping the research. There's going to be many factors that are going to, oh, sorry, previous slide, Deanna. Thank you. There's going to be so many factors which determine how you scope your research, but I think there are a few things that you want to keep in mind as you start. And the first one is going to be the research question. I think one of the traps that is quite easy to fall into is setting a huge research question that you could spend years and years looking into, or do a PhD on, or maybe not even setting a question at all. So where we always like to start is define your question. What are you trying to answer? This might be one kind of primary question, or it could be a number of follow-up questions. But either way, it's important to articulate the parameters that are going to focus your research. It might be specific beneficiary groups or geographies that you want to look at. We've already touched upon this, but the audiences, thinking back to the why, are also going to be another key determinant. Is this about convincing senior leaders? Is it about bringing your wider employee base on board, sharing learnings with others? Again, considering that at the outset in order to determine how you go about your research. And then there's some more kind of practical things to consider, which is, of course, timelines and resources. So how quickly do you need your results? How much resource do you actually have to do this research? And that's really going to determine whether you're going to be able to undertake first-hand primary research, or whether you need to take more of a desk-based kind of secondary research approach. And it will also determine, of course, whether you need any sort of third-party support. Now, Mitten is going to talk about those kind of options for research, but before I do, Sarah, maybe I can bring you back in here and ask about the process that you undertook to set your research question. First of all, what was it? And were there any factors that kind of played in for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So defining the question, our primary question was, what are the barriers faced by underserved entrepreneurs? And again, I touched on this before, but it is that group of entrepreneurs who we had decided as a company and as a foundation, we really wanted to support and impact. We really wanted to make sure the foundation was in line with the business. However, we went through a really important process with the team, which was about that defining. So we actually have a slide that has definitions of what do we mean by barriers, what do we mean by underserved, and what do we mean by entrepreneurs. We can't take any of those things for granted. So that was a really interesting process. The audiences for us was actually quite broad. You'll see in a video later on, we have shown this research to external audiences. We wanted to start a conversation with this, to internal, our colleague base, to senior leaders. And we're even talking, we've spoken with entrepreneurs about it. What did we get right? What did we miss? We actually really want to make sure we're getting this right. The idea wasn't, we know everything. The idea was, it's a jumping off point. So our audiences are pretty wide. our timeline and resources did dictate that we did this as the secondary desk-based research. Now, the team did speak with some nonprofits, some that were partners of ours, some that were not, and that was really useful. But primarily they were looking at research that had been conducted and bringing together. And I think I forgot to add, we also stages in 23 countries, and it was not going to be possible given our timeline and resources to look at all of those. So we selected 3 geographies that we felt were geographies SAGE had a large presence in and also had significant differences in them, where hopefully we wouldn't just be looking at only one type of entrepreneur. So those 3 geographies were the UK, the US, and South Africa.
Great, thank you. Mitten, I'll hand over to you. Or you're on mute. No, I can't hear you. Do you want to mute and unmute? If not, I can take it on over. Oh no, technical issues. We were talking about this before we started the webinar. Do you want to hop on and hop off? Yeah? Great. Diana, do you want to go to the next slide? Great. Perfect. So we can have a look. Well, I'll start and Miss Lynn can always take over when she rejoins, hopefully not on mute. Looking a bit more into what we actually mean by primary and secondary research. So by primary research, this kind of, if anyone has been to university, this might take you back or kind of to GCSE and A-level years, is that looking at the first-hand collection of original data directly from the sources and participants themselves. So here, the types of methods that we'd be looking at are things like interviews and focus groups. This might be with direct beneficiaries of the kind of social issues you're focusing on, but it could also be kind of that one step back, so speaking with experts and NGOs, just like Sarah was referring to. It might also be surveys and questionnaires to gather the wider sample, or of course going on site and participating in observations. Oh, sorry, Metin, did I hear you just come back?
Am I back?
We can hear you and we can see you.
Perfect.
I was just explaining about primary research.
Apologies, everyone. Okay, thanks, Katie. Did you get through the primary research?
Yeah.
I'll kick off from there then. So yeah, so primary research, there are 2 key types, and I guess from our perspective, we've seen both of them work well, and we'll come on and talk about some of the considerations later. But primary research is really where you are collecting original data from sources and participants. So the research is actually gathering information firsthand rather than kind of relying on existing information. The types of kind of primary research that people tend to look at, so interviews and focus groups, so that could be with experts. We heard Sarah talk about how they actually kind of talk to their NGO partners, so that would be an example of primary research. You could also kind of conduct surveys and questionnaires to gather more data, so it enables you to go to a broader group of people. And you can also consider things such as site visits and observing to kind of gain knowledge and experience firsthand of a particular social issue and how it plays out with beneficiary groups. In terms of secondary research, so this is really where we're referring to analysis of existing data from previously published sources. So that kind of desk-based landscape review. And often here, the types of sources that we would go to would be things like academic journals on a particular topic, looking at NGO research reports. There's lots of information out there on social issues from think tanks. And then there's also government-led research as well. So a kind of huge variety of different sources that are available to look at. I guess in terms of kind of considerations for each, and as you think about which approach might be most beneficial as you think about undertaking your own research, I guess there's some key things to note. So particularly when it comes to primary research, so I think here one of the kind of real benefits is that it can give you very specific insights. It's much more customized to your specific research question, and you get that kind of first-hand knowledge and experience from that direct engagement. It could, for example, be more appropriate. So when companies are undertaking impact measurement, for example, and they want the specifics around their own program, they would do primary research there. I guess the other key thing here is when you're undertaking primary research is to really think about who you're going to talk to. So thinking about your sample and your methodology to try and avoid bias and ensure that you're getting that diversity in terms of who you're talking to and that diversity of opinion. And there's also ethical considerations. So as you're engaging with people, to think about things such as voluntary participation, ensuring that you're protecting data and anonymity. So, you know, that would also be absolutely crucial for primary research. And I guess the final point is really around resource and time. And primary research does tend to be more time intensive and resource intensive as well. And because of the sensitive nature sometimes of engaging with people, this might be where an organisation or a company brings in an external party to kind of help facilitate that type of engagement. If we move on to secondary, so this is very kind of widely used. There's a wealth of valuable information out there and lots of different sources, and it can be far less resource intensive and quicker to do. So those are some of the kind of key benefits of why companies might take this approach. I guess from a point of caution and what to really look out for, I guess here really thinking about the credibility of your sources. So when we undertake that desk-based review and look at conducting research, really thinking about who produced that research, what their perspective might be, making sure that you kind of again go out to different sources, also looking at how relevant that data is. So, you know, there's a huge wealth of information out there, but really finding the specifics and the information that's going to be relevant to your research question. And also thinking about the timeliness of the data. So, you know, there might be academic journals from 10 years ago, but we all know that the external situation has changed. So looking at things like the data sources and the timeframes for that as well. And I guess the key point here is that one method isn't necessarily better than the other. And so it's really important to go back to, I guess, those 4 key areas that Katie talked about to really determine what's going to fit best for you and what you're trying to achieve. And it could be that actually a combination approach is going to be something that works well. So with that, Sarah, just to hand over to you, and if there are kind of any perspectives or thoughts about the approach that you took here, and you mentioned it was kind of desk-based, but then you did have some engagement as well with NGO partners.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we were really pleased with everything that came back. I think one of the things we went into this knowing was, first of all, our timeline was short and we knew that would dictate some. We also knew that this was not a new area that hadn't been researched. We knew that there were a lot, from think tanks to NGOs to people, universities who've studied this. And so I think talking with your team, we felt very confident that there was a lot of research out there that could be analyzed and brought together through desk-based research, and that gave us confidence in what the results would be. So that was definitely a factor for us.
Right. So we're now onto the kind of final area of the webinar, which is how you use those results effectively. So Deanna, if we could have the next slide, please. Brilliant, thank you. So you've kind of undertaken that research, you've got your results, and you really want to kind of maximise and make sure that you're using those in the most effective way. And I want to make sure that I give time for Sarah to talk about this, because I think SAGE have been a great example of how you use those results and engage with different stakeholders in different ways. What you can see here from our side, there are probably 3 key things that those results can really help to inform. The first is programme delivery, so providing that foundation, thinking about your theory of change, so you know, what's the social issue, how you're going to tackle it, thinking about how you can use that to identify the partners that you work with, so whether it's a new partner or a different partner. And I think, as we heard from Sarah and Katie, you know, it's a really great way of understanding what the external landscape is like. So highlighting where there could be gaps in interventions and where there's already players who are kind of addressing a social issue or a need. And hopefully what comes out of that is a kind of program and interventions that are different, innovative, and really kind of tackle the issue and create the impact that you're after. The second one that we've heard about is just, it's so powerful for building that internal case and engaging with senior leaders in particular, but also wider colleagues. So having that kind of data and research to really kind of tell your story in a much more powerful way in terms of why are you trying to tackle this issue, what's the role that you can play, really kind of helps to get the whole business involved. And then the final one is the kind of wider engagement piece of that amplification. So having that research and data really kind of helps you to share those learnings. So can you be collaborating with other people? Can other people learn from you? Are you all trying to solve the same issue? And therefore it's a great way of kind of working together. And then kind of advocating as well, so getting that message to others, and of course kind of building your own external profile as well as a thought leader in this space. So those were some of the things that we came up with. Sarah, over to you for the final few minutes in terms of how you've used the results, and then I know we've got a video as well.
Yeah. So really quickly, I will touch on what the results were because I feel like I've danced around this, but the main takeaways were that there were variations by the three regions I talked about, the UK, the US, and South Africa, but not huge differences. Again, it wasn't a surprise to us, but we wanted to make sure that was right. We like to refer to the largest barriers that were found as the 3 C's: capital, coaching, and connections. So capital, financial capital, and we know that entrepreneurs need this. Coaching, business skills and training, and then also connections. So that's mentorship, networks, access to groups. So those were the really broad. What the research helped us determine was the meeting point of, so what entrepreneurs need, where there are gaps, and that's one thing I didn't talk about, but the research gave us, we asked to really look at where other companies and are already serving this space. We are not looking to make an impact in the area that somebody already is making an impact. So what are the needs of the entrepreneurs who are underserved? Where are their gaps? And then what we're working on internally, of course, is, so where is that meeting point where of the resources that Sage can leverage from those 3 C's? So that is really where we came as far as the audiences. So that's how we've really used it internally. We've taken that. We've done a lot of speaking about this into internal and external audiences, which you'll see through this video, which I think is great to watch. This is something that our senior leaders have seen, our colleagues, as well as external audiences. So I'll probably leave it there so we have time to see it.
Great, Sarah, thanks for that. And Deanna, if you wouldn't mind just sharing the video.
Success takes hard work, dedication, and money.
The biggest cliche is that if you work really hard, you'll succeed. It fails to acknowledge the fact that not everyone has access to the same things.
One of the things that I've realized with inspirational quotes is that they don't speak to the life experience that many folks go through before they actually end up at the start line.
Women are at a disadvantage in absolutely every aspect of living. And I don't think, female founders are any exception.
I didn't have the same opportunities that my counterparts that were white had.
Overall, just being a Black woman, tech entrepreneur, that's already like 3 niches right there.
Supporting unrepresented entrepreneurs, it takes commitment.
As Sage has put, actual, money behind it, has put mentorship behind it, action, inviting me out to be in the same spaces as, of other executives and, board members. It's about putting, the buck behind the wall.
I definitely do feel less isolated. I feel connected to a different world. Understanding that there are folks that can give me different perspectives is definitely very helpful.
I've always believed in the importance of surrounding myself with people who know more than me, or who have expertise that I don't have, or networks that I don't have, who really believed in the same things that I did.
Great. Well, that's perfect timing, because I know we've come to the end of the webinar, but I think that was a brilliant way to kind of end it, and just to kind of see how the results have been communicated in such a kind of exciting way. From our side, just a huge thank you, Sarah, to you for joining and sharing so openly your perspectives. And I think hopefully everyone would have taken away so much, particularly people who are thinking about undertaking research themselves. And a big thank you to everyone for joining. We will be back in the new year with some more ESG bites. So thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.